Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And today I'm super excited to have with us Adam Pavlitz. He is the CEO and president of Anago Cleaning Systems. And I'm super excited to have this conversation today about franchising and master franchising and some unique things that they're doing at Anago. So welcome, Adam. We're excited to have you.
Hey Ryan, thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting with you.
So the first thing I always like to ask guests is, why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about Anago cleaning systems? Why do you do what you do?
So that's a long question and a little bit of a loaded one in my case. So I got into Anago because my father actually founded the business back in 1989. I was not at all interested in joining the proverbial family business, and it wasn't until 2009 that I actually got involved. And the short version is it's a unique business model where yes, technically we're in the business of commercial cleaning, but ultimately with how our franchise structure works, we're really in the business of putting people into business. We actually help open small businesses. We have 1,800 franchisees across the U.S. and Canada, all of which, frankly, are small business owners. And so that's the reward, honestly. I could be in landscaping or painting. It wouldn't matter. I mean, the ability to help people get into business for themselves and live the American dream. That's what keeps me excited and coming back every day.
I love it. It's always important to understand what drives a person and what drives that passion. And I think the way you articulated that was really cool. And clearly, when you've got when you've got systems like this, the intersection of people and process is going to be really important. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording. Tell me a little bit about how your business operates, how that business structure operates. You sort of alluded to it, but can you give us a little more detail about that?
So we're a franchise model. When I say franchise model, most people probably think of, like the McDonald's or Subways or something like that. And what those are traditional two-tier franchises. So you have the people who manage the corporate offices and then the people who own the restaurants. Ours, Anago is unique because it's a three-tier model, and it's not very common in pretty much anywhere in the world. There's a handful of brands I know of that even use it. And what we do, so the easiest way to explain it is we have three levels. So there's the corporate offices. We then have the what we call a master franchise, and then we have what we call a unit franchise. And so probably the easiest way to explain it is to actually go the opposite order. So when I say commercial cleaning, that's the business line we're in. Most of your listeners probably mentally picture the guy with the mop and the bucket, or the vacuum or whatever it might be, right? And those are the people who are managing the unit franchises. They own cleaning businesses in a
Mhm.
local, your town, USA, and they manage cleaning businesses. They hire their crew. They, buy the chemicals, the equipment, and they keep the buildings clean. But the question is, where did they get their customers from in the first place? And so that's how our model gets really unique, is we realize that most commercial cleaning is actually done at night. And so you're cleaning the buildings, everything like I just said a second ago. And then you got to wake up in the morning if you're doing just a traditional cleaning business. And now you got to sell clients, you got to advertise, you're running around burning gas, meeting with new potential customers. You got to collect any money from the clients you've already cleaned. And so the cleaning business turns into this 24/7 just monster.
Right.
And so what our model does is it says, wait a minute, we can kind of separate the daytime from the nighttime aspects of the industry. And so that is what creates our master franchise. So a master franchise is, I kind of like to say, the white collar and a blue collar industry. There's someone usually, C-suite to VP, director level people, mid-career executives. They're coming out of whatever their previous industry might be. And they realize, like, wait a minute, I don't want to start from the bottom at some company somewhere else. I already have this skill set. I know how to manage a
Mhm.
sales team or a customer service team or whatever. And they fit to the master franchise model very neatly because what's kind of weird about our model, right? So I say commercial cleaning, the unit franchisee is the only one doing any commercial cleaning. And the master
Mhm.
franchisee does absolutely zero cleaning. They're in the cleaning business, so to speak, but they do zero cleaning. And so the synergy that gets created essentially is that The unit franchisee, they don't have to do any sales and marketing. They don't have to do any collections or major accounting, factoring receivable,
Yep.
that sort of stuff. They can just focus on keeping the customers happy. And the master franchise, they're running the sales teams and the accounting and all that, but do zero cleaning. So it
Got
creates
it.
a really cool synergy where, both are able to save big time on overhead. And all of that, man, does that require a whole boatload of processes to make sure everything, operates smoothly.
Absolutely. So how do you manage? So in regards to processes, so it sounds like you're working very closely with the master franchisors or master franchisees. How would you say that?
Both.
The master franchises, okay? You're working very closely with the master franchises. So you've got to set up processes at that level to enable them to be very successful. And then I imagine that you're also working on getting that next level down, getting the level of detail for expectations around how the brand should operate even at the unit franchise level. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that's for a first pass, that's closer than most people get. So that was good. Yeah, I mean it essentially works like, like channel marketing, right? Where, I have everything we do is primarily focused on the relationship with the master franchise. They're my direct franchisee. They're actually considered sub-franchisors, which is just a fancy word for saying they're when they sell a unit franchise in their territory, it's not my franchise. It's directly a franchise agreement with that master franchisee. So I ultimately turn into this train the trainer role where our focus is on helping the master franchises grow their business. And one of the biggest component of a master franchise growing their business is being able to sell and then support their unit franchisees, right? Because if you could sell all the clients you want, but if the people who own the cleaning businesses aren't doing a great job, you're going to lose just as
That's
many
right.
back door.
So it's a little bit of the leaky bucket syndrome, right? To kind of use a metaphor. It's like, yeah, if those unit franchises are losing customers as fast as you're bringing new ones in, then the master franchisor is having problems, which ultimately challenges you and your brand as well. So that's a really interesting model. And how did you decide to move in that direction? How did you decide to put that type of structure in, those levels of structure? What was the big benefit for you or for the franchisees when you were kind of setting up that structure?
So, I'll be the first to admit that, we weren't the first to use the model. I won't name drop competitors, but there definitely was a McDonald's, so to speak, of the space that came before.
Sure.
I think the value though of the model is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is how, there's two essential functions, right? And I guess the easiest way to think of it is most people know how to be the operator of a particular function, right? So maybe Ryan, maybe you're a great cook, okay? And someone goes, Ryan, you're such a phenomenal cook. You should open a restaurant. And maybe you are, maybe you make something amazing. But what do you know as a good cook about marketing,
Right.
inventory, spoilage, recruiting, staffing, right? The business side of the cleaning business is very different from cooking. And so same thing in the cleaning industry, the sales, marketing, and accounting side of the business is wildly different from cleaning buildings. I mean, let's be
Sure.
honest, not cleaning buildings is not rocket science. There is
No.
definitely better ways to do it, right? You can make your wheel a little bit rounder, use the proper chemicals and equipment and be more efficient. That way, you don't want to walk into your office and it smells like, some
Right.
crazy, Fabuloso scent or something like that. That's not, there's better ways. There is a
Yep.
way to do it better. But at the same time, it's two totally different businesses. So
Yeah.
you get this synergy where someone can get into business, for very low cost, very low barriers to entry in the cleaning space, and make a great living out of it without ever having to, have a background in marketing or accounting or any of that stuff that really comes with all of it. And then you have people
Sure.
whose background is marketing or accounting or sales, and that's all they focus on. So it allows people to focus on their strengths rather than trying to be a jack of all trades.
Makes sense. It makes a ton of sense. And so what are some of your biggest challenges that you've had? It may not be a current challenge, but even what are some of the biggest challenges you've had with getting franchisees or franchise master franchisees to follow processes that you've put in place? Are there times when you've really struggled with that particularly?
The old president of the company before me, that was one of his kind of one-liner jokes is, because with franchising, right, it's their own business. And yes, we have guardrails on things
Yeah.
of, things that our franchisees can and can't do, but it's their business. And ultimately, they have to make a lot of the decisions. So he would always, you'd get some pushback from from a franchisee about some process you're looking to change or implement. And he was from West Virginia by way of Texas. So he had this real, I'm not even going to do a good job at it, but this wild Southern accent. And he would always say, "So you want to get into franchising, do you?" And that's what it is. I mean, so when you approach your franchisees about a process update or change or something you feel that you could improve their businesses, number one, you better have tested it locally to make sure that it works for you. Then you better have probably recruited, three or four or five other franchises and say, hey, we're going to help support this, beta test this with us, let you, share your feedback, work out the kinks, and then ultimately then roll it out to the larger brand. And then when you do, you're going to have to communicate it for, 6 months to a year nonstop, just to, hey again, hey again, hey again. And so it's a lot of, rather than like dictating, it's a lot of influencing that I would say we have to do
Yeah.
in order to really move the needle on major changes.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about guardrails, and I think that's a really key thing. I think a lot of companies and business owners and business leaders struggle with the sort of fuzziness that happens between setting up a framework or setting up guardrails versus setting up standard operating procedures, right? Like very detailed standard operating procedures. What are some things that you've learned along the way, or what are some ways that you sort of separate your framework for operating versus the standard operating procedures for doing specific tasks or activities?
So, I'm admittedly like a recovering micromanager. I mean, I'm someone who I had an employee say, "I've never seen a CEO get as involved in you." And I kind of looked at him cockeyed, and I'm like, "Wait a minute." I'm like, "I think you're saying I'm a micromanager." Um, but you realize that it really is. There's a fine line between micromanaging and then just ensuring that, whatever you said to a client or a franchise, you really deliver and you deliver on time. And so I think it, I know a lot of brands in the franchise space use things like EOS traction and
Mhm.
that sort of stuff. We don't necessarily use that. I think we use sort of a modified version of that. Big supporter, we use Trello as our organizational
Sure.
framework, great project management software. And the idea is that everything that we work on has to have an objective, an owner, a final due date, milestones and milestone due dates, and any other relevant information associated with it. And that way, if you manage every process like that, and that took a while, frankly. I mean, it probably took a year to get everyone kind of on the bus on that one and really thinking in the same way.
Yep.
I'm sure a few people hated my guts when it was like, did you put it on your board over there? But in order to do that now, I mean, you can go to any department at our organization and say, okay, what are the projects on it? Who owns it? What are they working on? Are they ahead of their milestones? Are they behind in their milestones? Are we on track to get it done on time, or do I need to step in or have someone step in and
Yep.
assist? I think that, I mean, that's been invaluable for us. And then from a process standpoint, I think there's certain things where it's probably, I guess in the cleaning space, right? There's a lot of ways to, skin a cat, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, but it's probably an explanation of like, here's our best practices, right? Here's our kind of happy path of how we recommend you do it. Then it's, here is a list of things that absolutely have to be done. And here is a list of things that absolutely should never be done. And it allows sort of that, like, it's kind of bowling with bumpers. It allows for, here's what we recommend, but definitely don't do these two things. And definitely make sure at the end that you can say, yes, I did these two things. You're good.
Right.
I think it streamlines things really, because it started with a definition of done, right? Everybody talks about that. And then I started going, we also really need to define like what not to do. Um,
Right.
right? You could say I cleaned this bathroom, but if you covered it in bleach, in my world, that's a terrible thing to do. You don't do that.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's like, did you clean it? But also, did you clean it with bleach? You shouldn't be. therefore this is not done. It's just a simple example.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important perspective to have. And there's something I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I'm very familiar with by the way with EOS and the get your processes documented and followed by all. Quite a number of my clients run on EOS, and I think it's a solid framework for leadership teams. The process piece of it, and you alluded to it a little bit there without getting into too much detail about people need to understand what they're expected to do, how to do it, and why it's important. There's this thing called training within industry that goes back to the Rosie the Riveter days. So the concept of training within industry was if you teach people what to do, how to do it, and why it's important, then they're less likely to take shortcuts. They're less likely to do those things that you want them not to do, such as cleaning with bleach in a bathroom, as an example. So, why do we use a certain chemical when cleaning a bathroom? Well,
Right.
it's because, we want it to smell properly, we want it to sanitize, we don't want it to destroy, certain types of countertops or whatever. Like those types of things, when you explain what are you supposed to do, clean the bathroom. How do you do it? You got to clean, there's, 12 steps or whatever. And then why is each of those steps important to be done the way that we've explained?
Right.
And it's really interesting how the human mind works. When people understand why something's important, they're far more likely to do it and follow it. They're far less likely to take shortcuts, and they're far more likely to make good suggestions.
Yeah.
Sometimes when employees come in and they make a suggestion, sometimes I hear managers talk about, "Oh, well, you know, that's a terrible suggestion. They're just inexperienced or they don't have common sense." Maybe, or maybe they don't understand the why behind what they're doing. And if they did, they'd start making those connections and do it right. Have you
Yeah.
experienced any of that along the way? Kind of,
Yeah, no, that's I like it's simpler how you phrased it with just making sure that, why is it important? But you're right. I mean, it's something that we do as part of training, and at least in our corporate staff, as an example. So, for example, I was an example that popped into my head while you were talking was, we have people who do the collections, like I was telling you at the master franchise offices. And if they're thinking of it like I'm calling people to bother them about money, and they didn't pay, and I'm chasing them down, and probably they're not happy to hear from me, right? Because it's a collections person going, "Hey, you haven't paid your cleaning bill. Hello." If you think of it like that, you go like, you're probably gonna have a miserable day. But if you go, wait a minute, every time you collect something, what you're actually doing is you're getting payment for an independent small business owner, and you're helping turn around and helping him or her pay his employees. And oh, by the way, the holidays are, coming up, or, maybe they have a birthday coming up, or who knows, whatever
yeah,
personal lives, they have bills. We all have bills. All of a sudden you go, wait a minute. So I'm not just hassling people. I'm literally helping put food on the table for the small business owner. Now it's like, okay, wait a minute. I need to really get out there and hustle and make sure we're collecting everything for them, because it's a major impact to their lives.
yeah. It's one of the things that we find very, very important when getting people like, I kind of alluded to that, get your processes documented and followed by all. In order to get people to follow processes, when they understand the purpose, when they understand the why behind the process, we find that they often do it much more effectively. I've got a quick example of a restaurant franchise owner, a friend of mine was teaching some of his managers about this process. And one of the managers told me, "Ryan, you don't get it. Some of the people we hire in, they're just not that smart." Like he said, this guy, Robert, doesn't remember to flatten the chicken. And I'm like, why is he? Well, what's it mean to flatten the chicken, right? So, well, you got to flatten the chicken. We make these sliders and you got to flatten the chicken so that it cooks more evenly and you can eat it easily. And I said, okay, so you're telling me that some guy named Robert is not smart enough to know what to do. He said, "Oh no, I've told him a bunch of times. He knows what to do. So he's not smart enough to know how to do it." He said, "Well, no, it's very easy. You take a meat tenderizer and you pound on the chicken, right?" And so he said, "Well, so maybe it's not a problem of being smart enough. Does Robert know why he's supposed to flatten the chicken?"
Yeah.
And this restaurant manager, Aaron, looked at me and he's like, "Oh, no." He'd look at you like a deer in your headlights. So I gave him this homework assignment. You got to go explain to Robert why
Yeah.
he's supposed to flatten the chicken. And that's your homework assignment. Let's see. And every time I checked in with Aaron after that, and I asked him, does Robert flatten the chicken? What do you think he told me?
Yeah.
Every single time, because once Robert made that connection, so I think a lot of times managers and leaders take these excuses of, well, the people I've got maybe aren't smart enough, or they don't have enough common sense, or they're not, whatever. And we use that as an excuse for why they're not following a process, when in reality, Robert just wasn't trained properly about why he's supposed to do it and why it's important. And all of a sudden, every time Robert's flattening the chicken. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important for probably those master franchise owners, for the franchise owners, for even at your level, when you're thinking about rolling out these new processes, when people make those connections like that one you shared about, you know, why am I collecting money? It's because I'm helping a small business owner. It's a very different attitude to go into it with.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The flattening the chicken. I hired a chief strategy officer a couple years ago, and one of the phrases he would always say is, "Those who matter need to know why."
Mm.
And that was something that resonated really well with me because you go, yeah, if you told me, I don't know, stand on your head and gargle peanut butter, some just astronomically ridiculous thing, I would be like, what do get out of here. It sounds ridiculous. But if it was, hey, if you do that, here's $1 million, like, okay, where's the peanut butter? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and so, that's obviously a, silly example. But if you explain to someone, yeah, this is why we're doing this. This is what makes it important. Now they're more likely to at least understand with what the end goal really is and not just checking off a task list.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. What wisdom would you provide to folks who are thinking about going into a franchise or thinking about going into a master franchise? I presume you're looking for more master franchise owners and franchise owners. What advice would you give them about what it takes to be successful?
Yeah, so in the franchising space, I mean, I don't want people to think one of two things here. One, that it's some sort of automatic, easy thing. A lot of people go, okay, so you're gonna help me get into business and you're gonna set me up and I'm gonna use your brand. And then they think if you build it, they will come. You know what I mean? It's not Field of Dreams or any of that sort of stuff. It is something where you got to get up every day, roll your sleeves up, and really work at whatever it may be, and whether that's cleaning buildings or getting your sales team hyped up and ready to close some more deals or whatever it may be. It's not automatic. I would say do your due diligence, ask all the questions, right? These, a franchise
Yep.
agreement are usually 5-10 years. So it's a marriage in some cases, maybe longer than some people's marriages in some cases. Um, and you have to understand what all the terms mean and what does that look like. Ask all the questions you can possibly ask to make sure you're as educated on it as possible, because then it's wedded bliss or not bliss for the next decade. And so I would say make sure you're doing your research. And then lastly, I would say make sure it lines up with what you're passionate about. Look, I'll be the first to say no, cleaning for me wasn't something that when I was a kid, I go, oh yeah, one day I want to grow up and be in the cleaning business. I probably, maybe I wanted to be an astronaut or a dinosaur.
Yeah.
It's got to be something you're passionate about, something that every day you wake up and you're excited about. And so whether that's cleaning or fitness or educating kids or in mine, right, it's not about cleaning, it's about sales. I'm pumped
Yeah.
about making sales and making deals and helping people's lives. Make sure it's something you're passionate about and it's not just like the cool brand of the moment, because there's a lot of franchises that have come and gone over the last 100 years that franchising's
Yeah.
existed. And so if it's not something you're really excited about, you're not going to give it your all, and it's not going to be what you hope it is. But if it is and you really pour your heart and soul into it, I mean, sky's the limit.
That's fantastic. Well, awesome. Thank you, Adam, for being on this episode of Optics in Action. How do people find out more about Anago cleaning systems if they're listening to this and they're like, I think I might want to explore getting into franchising or being a franchisee of the system? How would they find out more or learn more about you?
So a few ways. One, obviously our website is anagocleaning.com. It's ANAGO cleaning.com. And then we're on all the social media. So Facebook, Instagram, X. I got to get used to saying X instead of Twitter, YouTube, everything. And it's all, at Anago Cleaning. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn myself. Just type in Adam Pavlitz and I'll be sure to shoot me a message and I'll be sure to respond.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on this episode of Optics in Action. Again, Adam Pavlitz, the CEO and president of Anago Cleaning Systems. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure, man.
Hey there, my name is Ryan Weiss, and I am the host of the Optics in Action podcast, where we spotlight visionary leaders who bring clarity and innovation to their industries. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you know someone who would be, you can find more information about the podcast and listen to previous episodes at opticsinaction.com. We'd be thrilled to have you on the show and can't wait to hear your story.